Hi, Roger Fredenberg here. I did this interview with Dr. Samuel Cohen, the inventor of the neutron bomb, before he passed away back in 2002. It was actually August 12, 2002. And he lays out the real danger we face with China and these other entities out there like Russia. And now it seems like it's full circle. This story has come full circle. But when you listen to Dr. Cohen, and please forgive me, there are a few glitches in this tape or this CD. Somehow it got scratched up. There's a few little glitches in it, but you're going to get the full essence of what Dr. Samuel Cohen was trying to warn us about. Folks, America is in real peril today. Sam Cohen knew it in 2003. You better listen now in 2015. Here is Dr. Sam Cohen. Now, we face some of the greatest challenges in modern history. We've got the wars and rumors of wars, but it's serious stuff. And a lot of people have played into what America has become. And our military apparatus and the might and the power that we have as the world's only superpower may seem like a blessing on some days, but I'm not sure it is a blessing to be the only superpower in the world. But there are a few people who really understand it. And one of them is joining us on the program now. Recently, he had a commentary in the Los Angeles Times. Dirty bombs drop dilemma on West. Moral and other questions encircle this new threat. The gentleman I'm about to introduce you to is one of America's foremost scientists and maybe one of the most important people in modern warfare history. And we consider him a friend, and he's a wonderful man and a great, great American. And he happens to be the person who invented and developed the neutron bomb. Sam Cohen, welcome back to the Roger Fredenberg Show. A pleasure, sir.
Thank you, sir. It's likewise.
Sam, I read your commentary at LA Times, and there's some interesting dichotomies here with regard to how we approach what we know is coming. Give me some insight on what you think we're headed toward.
Well, in the broadest overall sense, Roger, you just summed it up 2 or 3 minutes ago. We're heading for some level of disaster. We seem bound and determined to stay in the world that we don't understand. We seem bound and determined to run a world that we don't understand. We seem bound and determined to once again send military forces abroad to accomplish missions that history has shown us we don't know how to accomplish with any level of sanity or success or anything else like that. But here we are, self-proclaimed, the world's greatest superpower, and we have scads and scads of military forces, and we just seem bound and determined to use these things to shape the world to our liking. It won't work. It never has worked. But we're just moving ahead.
Well, we leaned on something, Sam, that I think is important that we recognize for years through the Cold War, and that was the notion of mutually assured destruction, keeping the world peaceful. You know, if you push your button, we'll push ours, and that'll be the end of it all. I mean, that essentially was the synopsis. And it did seem to keep the world safe for a long time. But the rules of the game have now changed, have they not?
I have to correct you. We defined the Cold War in these thermonuclear terms, that if each side had a sufficient arsenal of hydrogen bombs, that this would guarantee the peace. Because if the peace were to be fractured, that would be the end of human civilization and so on and so forth. But while this Cold War was going on, we managed to implicate ourselves into all sorts of sub-nuclear wars, all of which turned out to be disasters of one magnitude or another. They cost our country literally trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of American lives. So there was a hot war going on during the Cold War. Now the logic behind this Cold War and mutual assured destruction and so on and so forth was just spun from whole cloth. There's nothing in history to indicate that when two adversaries have extremely powerful weapons, that sooner or later they won't use them. But we invented this mythology that neither side, regardless of the circumstances, would ever use its thermonuclear arsenal, even though, Roger, our policy was based on actually using them if our allies overseas got into difficulties. If NATO were threatened with being overrun by the Soviet Union, we would drop hydrogen bombs on Moscow and all the rest of the USSR. Now, nobody in their right mind, having a shred of sanity, no president, would ever want to do that. But nevertheless, that was this fantasy that we went through, and so the conventional wisdom is that it was a policy that worked. And again, there's not a shred of truth. I once asked a friend of mine who was not in my camp or our camp, but a very well-known internationally expert on nuclear disarmament and nuclear warfare matters and so on. How come overall, this was fairly recently, how come over all these decades we never went to all-out nuclear war? And he gave me the best answer I have ever heard. Just lucky.
Well, that's probably true. Let me talk to you a little bit about the threats that are out there. We keep hearing about dirty bombs, which you talk about in this article. And those dirty bombs are not the threat that some people make them out to be, are they?
Well, everybody has their own definition of a dirty bomb.
All right, hang on a minute, Sam. I hear the music. We've got to take a break.
All right, let's break.
Just hold on for a second. We got two breaks that come up pretty quick here. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Roger Fredenberg Show. Our guest is the inventor of the neutron bomb. Dr. Sam Cohen is with us, talking about his commentary, which appeared last Thursday in the Los Angeles Times, and generally the topic du jour, which is, are we going to survive these difficult times?
Broadcasting live from Radio America in Washington, D.C. You're listening to The Roger Fredenberg Show. Call Roger right now at 1-800-510-TALK.
42. 1-800-243-5242. He might just be the most important scientist of our time, although he would say probably not, but his discovery of the neutron bomb, I think, is significant, and we'll find out why as we talk to Dr. Sam Cohen here on the show tonight. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the Roger Fredenberg Show.
Thank you.
Dirty bombs.
Roger?
Yes.
Let me interject. May I?
Please.
Okay. We wound up before the break talking about mutual assured destruction and deterrence and so on.
Yes.
A little story. True. Back around 1970, I was working in the Pentagon, and one day I wandered into the office of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who happened to be a very good pal of mine. And the two of us settled down together for a private tete-a-tete. And in the course of our discussion, I asked him, Tom, let's just suppose that the Soviets were to invade Western Europe, to invade NATO, and they were succeeding, and they were threatening to march to the English Channel. Would we use our strategic, hydrogen bomb arsenal to bail them out by attacking the Soviet Union? And he paused, and he had this very reflective look on his face, and then very softly he answered. He says, no, we wouldn't do it. And here was a guy that had access to all the highest, top secrets of our planning and so on and so forth. He was dead right then, and he would be dead right now. These are weapons that would be insane to use in defense of our so-called allies, who really aren't allies. They're all for themselves.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd just toss this one in for your listeners. All right, but now you go ahead. It's your nickel.
All right. I'm concerned about several things. One is why the neutron bomb, your project, was pulled from the arsenal.
Because there were two guys back in Washington. One was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a fellow by the name of Cohen Powell, and the other one is a president by the name of George Herbert Walker Bush. And after the Gulf War, General Powell went to see President Bush, and he recommended very strongly that all the battlefield weapons, including the neutron bomb, be removed from our stockpile. And Bush took Powell's advice, and they were all eradicated. And as of right now, we don't have one nuclear battlefield weapon, whereas other countries around the world are building up stockpiles galore of these weapons. The Russians have, according to U.S. intelligence, on the order of 10 to 12,000 of these things. If we ever tangled with some of these countries, the Chinese probably have them in the many, many, many hundreds. If we were to tangle on the battlefield with these countries, we would lose ignominiously.
Yeah, not even a Pyrrhic victory. You say we would lose.
Yeah. So
wow,
as you gather, our current Secretary of State is not exactly my number one favorite.
Yeah.
And pardon me for being so irreverent. Our current president is not exactly my number one president either, because I think he's essentially picked up the advice of Powell and his daddy.
Well, it
was a terrible mistake.
We're going to face I mean beyond the conflicts that we have to deal with now, this radical Islamic movement and the terrorism and these other kind of misadventures of Alibaba, I like to call them. We've got bigger problems on the horizon. You mentioned China. China, of course, is in a little spitting contest with Taiwan this weekend. I always get a little bit fearful when I see that happening. I can just see the northern Korean peninsula coming alive to throw us off of balance as China rushes in to recapture Taiwan. You know, I can almost see the strategy. You can almost paint it on a map for you. And you know at some point in time it's going to happen. And it seems that our resolve is not to be as powerful or to appear as powerful as we might otherwise. It would seem to me that the neutron bomb is the perfect answer to a lot of these questions. Now, I recall you and I speaking a number of years back, and you told me that this bomb could be made in a multiple of sizes. It could be made to take out a couple of square miles or a much larger area. You could control and contain the damage. Is that right?
Roughly, yeah.
And
it's a very small bang, and so it's not going to have its effects over 5 or 10 square miles. We're talking on the order roughly of a square mile or so. But that's a very large area. But now let's talk about a scenario.
All right, hold that as a pregnant pause, Sam, as we take this other break. I said these two breaks come up very quickly, and then we have a fairly long segment following that. Dr. Sam Cohen here on the Roger Fredenberg Show. He's the inventor of the neutron bomb, and you're going to learn more about it and maybe more about why it's important in just a minute. The Roger Fredenberg Show, joined by Dr. Sam Cohen, the inventor of the neutron bomb. Welcome back, Sam.
Thank you.
All right, so the neutron bomb, now, for people who don't understand the difference, can you give a really quick, abridged version of why the neutron bomb is different than a nuclear bomb?
It puts its sole emphasis on nuclear radiation, namely neutrons, not on blast and heat, which gives one the opportunity to kill people but not destroy property. Now, may I have the floor, please?
Yes, please.
The Chinese have made no bones about the fact that they've been accumulating a pretty significant stockpile of neutron bombs, and they probably have on the order of many hundreds of these things that could put atop a missile. Now, here's a scenario. I wrote this up a couple of years ago or so, which I might say caused a little bit of consternation. Suppose that one day they decided this fracas with Taiwan has to come to an end, and so they loaded up their missiles with these neutron warheads, and they fired them at all of the key military bases in Taiwan. What would happen is that the personnel would be killed or incapacitated. The bases would remain intact. The country would have been militarily defeated. They could then sail across the Taiwan Straits and take it over. Now, if the U.S. Navy decided to get tough and interfere with that operation, they could use these same neutron warheads against our Navy, and they could kill all the personnel in our combat ships and have a U.S. warship just adrift with dead people. Now, that is not crazy, fantastic, incredible scenario. It's very, very doable and believable. And so
there'd be no way to stop it.
There'd be no way. And so I wrote the article up, and it caused quite a stir. And I might say, especially over in Taiwan.
Well, I mean, I imagine everything you write is watched very carefully by people who have a lot to lose in this great gamble.
Well,
and I think that I'm not a big fan of George Bush the father. Sam, I have my own reasons for really disliking him.
Well, I have mine.
And my reasons are a little different than yours, but I didn't think a whole lot of him. I don't know about the kid. He seems to be a puppet on a string. Excuse me. He seems to be a puppet on a string. Yeah.
With a teleprompter.
Yeah, there you go. And so I'm not. I mean, he just doesn't impress me. I mean, he's okay. I like his personality, his demeanor. Seems like an affable and decent fellow. But I'm just not. I don't think he really has the chutzpah to do what has to be done. Now, if we face these threats and we don't have these things in our arsenal, which I thought was interesting because during the attack on Afghanistan, they talked about deploying tactical nuclear weapons. What are they talking about besides depleted uranium? In the arsenal. What do they have?
They didn't know what they were talking about. What they possibly may have been referring to are the so-called earth-penetrating nuclear devices. And so for deeply buried underground military facilities, they can penetrate a significant distance, and then having a nuclear charge, they go bang, and you have a big seismic wave, and it'll break up this underground facility.
Right.
But that's not the problem over in Afghanistan. The problem over in Afghanistan are a bunch of raggedy clad, guerrillas roaming the hills, and there's no way of using nuclear weapons against them. The only way to deal with them is to send hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops to just comb the countryside, and they'll start taking casualties. And when it's all over with, we won't have accomplished anything of significance because there are far more terrorists around the rest of the world than there are in Afghanistan or Pakistan.
Well, when the conflagration began, Sam, I said, why don't they go over there and drop some neutron bombs and rid the earth of the biological mishap and put a big flag up and call it Americanistan and offer the Palestinians a new homeland. I know that sounds a little radical, but if we don't have the courage to use these weapons and then we're going to wait for them to be used against us, it doesn't sound like we've got much hope for the future, Sam.
It's worse than not having the courage to use these weapons. We don't have these weapons that would allow allow us to have some courage.
Yeah.
So that's the
Well,
dilemma.
so I mean, essentially, you're saying we have a battlefield tactical disadvantage with the Soviets and the Chinese, and maybe others. We don't know.
Disadvantage is the understatement of the century.
Right, but I don't think the average American walking around with their chest puffed out and their plastic Chinese-made American flag on the hood of their car understand how vulnerable we are, Sam.
I'm afraid you're right.
And so that's why you're here tonight, my friend. I think the American people have a right to know that China and Russia and maybe North Korea and maybe some of these Middle Eastern countries, I'm not sure, have the tactical advantage. As you said, you want to take out a battleship? Neutron bomb with a missile, it only has to hit the target area. It doesn't even have to hit the target.
No.
And you got a bunch of dead people on a ship. And if you want to commandeer the ship now, you've got a nice battleship, right?
Well, the Chinese would have come in possession of a beautiful navy.
Yeah, you recall when we had a mishap, a mid-air mishap, Wang Wei, a fighter pilot from China, clips one of our EP-3s,
right,
an intelligence surveillance plane, and we land in Hanang Island. And then surrender, I'm told, some of our most valuable data that couldn't be destroyed immediately. And some of our three-dimensional missile tracking systems and stuff may now be in the hands of the Chinese, technology that they wouldn't have discovered for 100 years. And nobody really, I think, nobody pays attention to just how powerful we make these countries. And then there was the Clinton administration through Bernie Schwartz over at Loral, who made certain that the Chinese had this ballistic missile guidance technology, which was way beyond their means. And it's almost like we have a death wish, Sam.
It sounds like it sometimes.
What's the solution?
Well, in the most grandiose, all-encompassing terms, the solution in dealing with the rest of the world is to stay out of the rest of the world and turn back into a fortress America where we were in when I was a toddler after World War I.
Well, Sam, you know, when I was working on Pat Buchanan's presidential campaigns in 92 and 96, they had a term for us. They called us isolationists and extremists, and they, had a variety of names for us. And Bill Clinton talked about, the interdependent America, and I kept reminding the audience that we don't celebrate Interdependence Day on the 4th of July. But Americans, and maybe the media's at fault, I'm not sure who to blame, don't seem to have a grasp of what independence really means.
Yeah, and so I might say, during the last presidential election, I joined up with Pat Buchanan and his team, and I gave a speech, on his behalf and so on and so forth. And but regarding the military equation for our not-so-great country these days, Pat fell flat on his face. He understood this thing extremely well, but he was never able to get his message across in terms that people could understand and believe and want to act on. It's a tragedy, but he flopped terribly.
Did he flop on purpose? Is what I want to know.
I can't answer that.
Because I asked Pat one time if he was like the controlled opposition, because he seemed to miss a lot of important points, which is why I didn't support him in the last election when he went third party, because he just aggravated me. So we talked about this in long detail, Sam, in 1996, about America's military vulnerability and about the fact that Bush and then Clinton didn't have the chutzpah to produce the weapons necessary to keep America safe in the future, and that we were entangling ourselves in a myriad of foreign operations that were none of our business. I mean, even to go as far, Sam, as to say that, this first time ever attack on a country which presented no threat at all to its neighbors, the NATO assault on Slobodan Milosevic's Yugoslavia, Serbia. Slobodan Milosevic may be a real son of a bitch, but he wasn't affecting his neighbors. He wasn't developing weapons of mass destruction. He was dealing with a severe irredentism problem on his southern border with Albania.
Yep.
How did that become a NATO crisis?
Because it was made into one. It never was in the first place. But again, that's the way we operate.
All right, but we have no worry at all about rushing in there with all this depleted uranium munitions, which when they shred, become volatile alpha radiation problems for people.
Hold on for a second.
Yes.
You're talking about these depleted uranium artillery shells.
Right.
And you said that they cause contamination?
Yes.
No, baloney. You're dead wrong. This is something I looked into very carefully when this furor broke out 3 years ago or so. There was absolutely no problem with radioactivity from these munitions. The anti-nuclear people just raised this hullabaloo and got an awful lot of Americans worried, including American soldiers and so on. And it's tragic. But fortunately, the issue managed to resolve itself, and we still have these munitions in our arsenal. But that would have been awful, to discard these weapons.
Yeah. All right. Why using Afghanistan as an example? Wouldn't that have been an appropriate place to use a neutron bomb?
No.
Why not?
Because we don't have enough intelligence to warrant their use.
Okay, when do you think would be the appropriate time to use them?
Well, the way things have been going, not in the foreseeable future. It's a place to use neutron bombs. If we do decide to go to war with Iraq, and I pray to God that we don't, but were we to do that...
Well, we're going to Iraq, Sam.
Then that would be an ideal place to use these things. During the Persian Gulf War, I wrote an article about proposing the use of neutron bombs in that war, namely, why sacrifice American bodies when we can do the job with neutrons?
Well, that's exactly my thinking.
And I caught fire on the Hill, on the Congress for a while, and I got a few congressmen in my corner. But then the word came out from the White House, which I considered bordering on treason, that under no conditions in this war will we use these weapons. And I heard the Chief of Staff of the White House, John Sununu, on television make that statement. And I told myself, that blankety blank, 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 blank is a blankety blank, blank, blank traitor.
Well, I mean, a lot of American bodies for nothing, I suppose, Sam. That I will never figure out. Hold on 1 minute. This is the final break of the hour. Sam Cohen is here. Dr. Sam Cohen, inventor of the neutron bomb. Should we use it? Where should we use it? I mean, he's the man. And I, of course, would use it more liberally, apparently, than Sam would. But that's okay. I'm a radio wacko. I'm allowed to have crazy opinions.
Welcome back to the Roger Fredenberg Show on the Radio America Network. And now, here's your host, Roger Fredenberg.
Ah, yes, How the West Was Won. Beautiful selection, my friends at the studio. 800-510-8255. Dr. Sam Cohen, inventor of the neutron bomb, is with us. Sam, I really appreciate you being here with us this evening. I do.
It really is my pleasure, Roger.
Well, and it's good to talk to somebody that's got your savvy and your experience because, I'm a talk show host and I have a tendency to get a little radical. They say it's for ratings' sake. I say it's just because I'm a radical. But the truth is, I don't see why we should send troops on the battlefield anymore when we don't have to. When technology makes it possible to, have the troops stay home and guard our own borders or something.
Well, I agree with you 100%. The march of technology, of military technology these days, is astounding beyond imagination. And when we can send a missile, just literally from the United States of America to practically any other place on the face of the planet, why bother to gird our loins and send countless thousands of American bodies, soldier boys,
There's no end to it in sight, then, is what you're saying.
No, we're just bound and determined to sacrifice young Americans. It's in our genes. It's very unfortunate.
It just seems so barbaric.
It is.
I mean, it is fringing on barbarism, isn't it?
It has a Stone Age mentality to it. But that's the way we are.
But if the American people are aware and know that it's unnecessary, can we pressure from the grassroots up a new way of thinking about military interaction?
Well, I really can't answer that. That's predicting the future. But I say there's a slim to none chance of this happening, of having an all-technology military. It'll be some mixture. All right, but when
Don Rumsfeld says we're going to be lighter, quicker, meaner, and leaner, and all that stuff that he talked about, Rumsfeld seems like a fairly decent fellow. I don't know him personally, but he seems like an okay guy.
He's okay to me.
It seems to me like he's got the theme, sort of.
No, the problem is he still wants soldier boys, in tanks or on the ground and so on and so forth. They'll be lighter and meaner and slimmer and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, they're going to be even more vulnerable to enemy fire than these big, colossal, huge tanks and armored personnel carriers and what have you.
Well, the message that I want to get out...
we may fight more effectively, but we're going to shed more blood.
The message I want to get across to the American people, if the listeners tonight take nothing else from this conversation, Sam, I want them to hear what you said, that the Chinese and the Russians and others have these neutron bombs. They are willing to use them. They will use them. And they can take out any of our ships, any of our battlefield battalions, anytime, any place, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Is that true?
You couldn't have said it better.
Sam Cohen, God bless you, my friend. Stay in good stead and good health.
I'll try.
And just thanks for being there, man. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. One of America's true heroes, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sam Cohen, inventor of the neutron bomb. All right, coming up, the good